from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Robin Dwyer. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories. A major search operation underway for 7 people missing after the collapse of a bridge in the US city of Baltimore as a cargo ship crashes into it. Dozens of Palestinians killed in overnight strikes on Gaza as Israel continues its military offensive, despite a UN resolution calling for a ceasefire. 5 Chinese construction engineers killed in a suicide attack near the Pakistani city of Besham. And fleeing violence and chaos that's killed thousands of people, Haitians desperate to leave rush to reopened airports. In the United States, the governor of Maryland has declared a state of emergency after a bridge collapsed in the city of Baltimore. Rescue workers are searching for survivors, and at least 7 people are believed to be missing after a cargo ship ran into the structure in the early hours of Tuesday. Our correspondent Louise Greenwood reports.
It was only as dawn broke over the city of Baltimore that the full extent of the damage became clear. The accident happened when a cargo ship ran into the Francis Scott Key Bridge, sending a number of vehicles falling into the water below. Footage on social media shows the moments after the 9,000-foot structure began crumbling, with several of its supports buckling under the impact. With the bridge completely destroyed, Baltimore's fire department has described a mass casualty incident at the scene. The search is underway for those thought to have fallen into the freezing waters of the Patapsco River below.
This is an unthinkable tragedy. We have to, first and foremost, pray for all of those who are impacted, those families, pray for our first responders and thank them, all of them working together.
Rescue workers rushed to the scene to help, but low temperatures and poor visibility are said to have caused a concern for the relief effort. While the details of what happened remain unclear, the Danish shipping giant Maersk has confirmed that the cargo ship involved is one of its own chartered vessels. It's believed the Singapore-registered ship was travelling from the east coast of the US to Colombo in Sri Lanka. There are no reports of injuries among the crew on board at the time. Spanning nearly a quarter of a mile, Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge is the 3rd longest continuous truss bridge in the world. Opened over 40 years ago, it's been the backdrop to many film and TV programmes, including the hit series The Wire. Emergency services say with efforts continuing, the casualty figure looks set to rise.
We are still very much in an active search and rescue posture at this point, and we will continue to be for some time. We have a large area that we have to search. This includes on the surface of the water, subsurface, as well as on the deck of the ship itself.
The authorities say that responders are operating cautiously, with some cargo or retainers still hanging from the wreckage and conditions described as unstable. Louise Greenwood, CGTN.
Well, let's go to the United States now and talk to our correspondent John Terrett in New York. So, John, are we any closer to knowing what happened?
Well, I think we probably have a big clue. I think we should just pause for a second and look at these pictures and realize the extraordinary magnitude of what has happened in a major American city. Baltimore is a major city on the East Coast and a major port. And incidents like this in the maritime world are, generally speaking, very rare, certainly in this part of the world. Now, as Louise Greenwood was just telling us, the Baltimore Fire Department are calling this a dire mass casualty event. And just to repeat a little bit of what she told us, they are looking now for 7 people who are in the water, it is assumed. Now, I think that number is likely to change, but for the time being, it's been constant at 7 for the last couple of hours. The divers are in the water, they're using sonar, they've detected cars in the water, clearly that were on the bridge at the time. So they're looking for drivers in their cars and construction workers who were working on the bridge when this incident happened just before 2 o'clock in the morning. Now, the Key Bridge, it's called the Francis Scott Key Bridge after the man who wrote the U.S. national anthem, but locals just call it the Key Bridge. It's one of 3 harbour crossings. If you want to get across the harbour in Baltimore, you either have the choice of 2 tunnels or the Key Bridge. And of course, what's significant about this is if you're carrying a hazardous load, for example, in a lorry, then you can't go into the tunnels. You have to use the bridge. So this is going to force drivers to go the long way round. ABC Television News is reporting that the Dali lost propulsion as it was trying to leave the port of Baltimore, and that would chime with the fact that we all saw on the video that the lights appear to go out just before it hits the bridge. And the Guardian newspaper is reporting that there was a collision involving the Dali in the Belgian port of Antwerp in 2016. Now, the Dali is a state-of-the-art ship. She's less than 10 years old. She was built in the Republic of Korea, and she was in New York last week. So she managed to navigate New York okay when she was here. The White House has been informed. President Biden's being told what's going on and kept closely informed. And as Louise said in her report there, the governor of Maryland, Wes Moore, has been on the scene. He's declared a state of emergency. But this is a quite extraordinary event in a major American city. Robin?
And John, clearly a devastating event in itself, but it's also going to have some knock-on effects, isn't it?
Very much so. I mean, Baltimore is a major port. There are others on the East Coast as well that can take stuff in and out, like New York, where I am, like Savannah in Georgia, Portland, Maine, Boston, Massachusetts. All of these ports are quite big. There's another one just very close by, actually, in Virginia. But the point about Baltimore is that it's the, how would you put it, really, the sort of consumer port. It's where the consumer goods come in. I was there a couple of years ago, and I'm sure I'm right, and I can't find a picture of this, but I'm sure the sign above the gate said the gateway to Asia, which is pretty extraordinary when you think that Baltimore is on the Atlantic Ocean, but I'm sure that's what it said. Mostly cars coming in and out of Baltimore, a little bit of coal as well. So, you know, there could be delays in your new car coming in from overseas, for example. Now, I'm afraid it's being reported now that this is so serious that the port of Baltimore is likely to be blocked, sealed off, at least for the rest of the year. And U.S. infrastructure generally is in a very poor state, as you know. This has political ramifications as well, because you only have to Google bridges in need of repair in America, and up it comes immediately. A report from 2022 with staggering statistics. 36%, 224,000 spans are in need of repair work. 78,000 bridges need to be replaced. 43,500 are structurally deficient. Now, I know that they're not all going to be hit by a very large, very heavy tanker, but it makes you think. President Biden's great success during his 3.5 years in office so far was the infrastructure bill, which he got through where many presidents have been unable to. But it doesn't benefit him politically because, of course, you put the money in now, all these projects are going to take at least 5 to 10, if not 15 years to be completed. So he had that success, but it won't help him in the ballot in November. And finally, of course, the optics for the country in the eyes of the rest of the world are very, very poor. Robin?
John, thank you very much. Our correspondent John Terrett in New York. Palestinian officials in Gaza say Israeli airstrikes have killed dozens of people over the past 24 hours. Missiles hit the area around Al-Shifa Hospital in the north and Rafah in the south, where more than 1 million people have sought shelter. The Israeli military is continuing its action against Hamas, despite the UN Security Council resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire. Qatar ceasefire talks are now at a standstill after Israel recalled its negotiators, saying that Hamas's demands are delusional. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Sarah Coates, who's in Tel Aviv. So, Sarah, Israel not backing down in its fight against Hamas, but some diplomatic efforts are continuing.
Hello, Robin. We are hearing now that a very small Mossad team does remain in Qatar after Hamas reportedly rejected these talks, wanting a full comprehensive ceasefire. We've also heard from the Qatari Foreign Ministry spokesperson. He came out to say that there is no time limit on talks. From day one, we have been positive, but the Israelis, the Prime Minister, certainly not backing down. Netanyahu's office releasing a statement a short while ago saying that Israel will not not submit to the delusional demands of Hamas. It will continue to act to achieve the goals of the war, and this is to release these hostages, to defeat Hamas, and to ensure Gaza never poses a threat again to Israel. And of course, all of this, Robin, coming a day after the United Nations Security Council passed that resolution for an immediate ceasefire. Let's take a listen to what some people here in Israel have to say about that.
I believe the UN resolution is horrifying. As a Jew, as an American, and as an Israeli, you're giving free cards to a Hamas a terrorist organization, and the world is abandoning Jews once again.
I'm very disappointed with our government and with our Prime Minister, Netanyahu. I think that he's a risk today for Israel. While we have a war and hostages, we need to do everything in order to release them now.
This comes as Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant is meeting with his counterpart Lloyd Austin in the United States. And according to senior US officials, he'll be asking the United States for more assistance and more weapons to continue this fight against Hamas, specifically F-35 and F-15 fighters and precision-guided munitions.
Meanwhile, back in Israel, mounting political pressure over enlistment into the IDF. What's going on there?
Certainly protests have been breaking out across the country over these exemptions for the ultra-Orthodox not to have to serve in the Israeli military, but that looks like it may change very soon. Until now, they have been exempt from joining the IDF, except that law that exempts them will expire next week. Got some interesting numbers here for you, Robin. 66,000 ultra-Orthodox religious men were not having to serve in the military last year. And according to the Finance Ministry, that came at a pretty heavy cost. It'll cost $27.5 billion over the next decade if current soldiers are forced to serve longer and these ultra-religious people do not have to enlist in the army. It's certainly not only causing tension on the street, but tension within the government. War Cabinet member Benny Gantz, he is threatening to quit the emergency war cabinet, the emergency government, if this law is not changed. Also, we've heard from the Defence Minister, Yoav Gallant. He's come out to say that he will not support this bill that the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has drawn up. So certainly a lot of friction here and a lot of friction also within the ultra-Orthodox community. We've heard from some of the head leaders there who are threatening to actually leave the country if these young men are forced to enlist. Robin.
Sarah, thank you very much. Our correspondent Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv. Well, that's the view from Israel. Let's go to Gaza now and talk to our correspondent in Rafah, Noor Harazin. So, Noor, dozens of people killed in the latest attacks across Gaza. What more can you tell us?
Well, it actually was one of the most horrifying, most intense Israeli attacks on Gaza. This overnight we heard continuous Israeli bombing, especially here in the city of Rafah. Talking about some of the highlights in a series of Israeli airstrikes on the Abu Naqira family home. 19 Palestinians were killed. 9 of them are children in a separate attack on the Al Mawasi refugee camp, which is filled with tents, displaced people, tents. 12 people from the Al Madhoun family were killed. Also in a separate attack, Elin Al Athamna, who is a 7-year-old child, was killed in an Israeli strike on their home in North Rafah. Also in Gaza, dozens of Palestinians were killed in and around the Al-Shifa hospital, specifically talking about the Al-Rimal street and also the Al-Nasr neighborhood, while the Israeli forces and the Israeli tanks continue heavily shelling these areas as the Israeli troops are now controlling these areas. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, 81 Palestinians Palestinians were killed in the coastal enclave over the past 24 hours, and this brings the death toll here in Gaza since the 7th of October up to 32,414 Palestinians.
And Noor, what can you tell us about reports that several Palestinians have drowned trying to access aid that was airdropped into the sea?
Well, yes, there were several aerial drops, food aerial drops yesterday by several countries, Jordan, the US, France and Egypt. Here is what happened in the north. Most of this aid landed in the As-Sudaniya area, which is very close to the shores of Gaza. So very little of these food packages actually landed on the land in northern Gaza, but many of the packages landed in the sea. Hungry Palestinians swam to try and get some of the aid packages. However, 7 people were killed. Five others are missing. Also, 4 other people killed because of the firing on the humanitarian aid. And I myself talked to Fawzi Slim, who is the father of one Palestinian that actually was killed by an aerial drop as the package landed on his head, as his father explained to us, and the parachute of the package did not open. So his son was not the only one killed in that incident. We are talking about tens of people, and this is making Palestinians asking a very good question. Why the Rafah border is not fully open? Why the aid is not being allowed into the Gaza Strip by the safest way, which is by land through the Rafah border? Over the past weeks, Palestinians here on the ground have been denouncing the aerial drops and calling upon Egypt to allow more humanitarian aid through the Rafah border.
Noor, thank you very much. Our correspondent Noor Harazin there in Rafah. An 8th suspect has appeared in court, charged over the attack on a Moscow concert hall that killed 139 people. The man, a Kyrgyz national, has been remanded in custody before trial. He's accused of providing accommodation to the 4 men charged with the killings. Meanwhile, Russian investigators are in Tajikistan questioning the families of those being held over the attack on the Crocus concert hall on Friday. A branch of the Islamic State group has claimed responsibility for the shooting. 5 Chinese engineers and their driver have been killed in a suicide attack in Pakistan. Their vehicle was rammed by a truck near the northern city of Besham as it headed towards a Chinese-backed dam construction project. It's the 3rd attack on Chinese interests in Pakistan in a week. Our correspondent Daniel Khan reports.
According to a senior police officer, the tragic incident unfolded this afternoon in northwest Pakistan as a convoy of Chinese nationals was attacked, resulting in the loss of 6 lives, out of which 5 are said to be Chinese nationals. Muhammad Ali Gandapur, the chief minister of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, has said that a suicide bomber targeted the convoy of the Chinese engineers traveling from Islamabad to their base camp in Dasu, located in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. The assailant drove an explosive-laden vehicle into the convoy. Dasu is a site for a dam project in Upper Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province and has witnessed such attacks in the past, including a devastating bus blast in 2021 that claimed the lives of 13 individuals, 9 of whom were Chinese nationals. Now, Gandapur has confirmed that the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa police has responded to the scene and has started relief efforts. The chief minister has also said that the remaining members of the convoy are safe.
China has called the UK's accusations that it's responsible for cyber espionage slanderous and says the evidence provided is insufficient. On Monday, British officials said Beijing is an economic threat to its security. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said the UK has invested in the tools and powers needed to combat threats to its cybersecurity. The United States and Britain have imposed sanctions on Beijing, accusing it of a sweeping cyber espionage campaign that allegedly hit millions of people, including lawmakers, academics and journalists.
China is strongly dissatisfied and firmly opposed to these sanctions and has made solemn representations to the relevant parties. We urge the United States and the UK to stop politicising cybersecurity issues, stop slandering and smearing China and imposing unilateral sanctions, and stop cyber attacks against China. China will take the necessary measures to resolutely safeguard its legitimate rights and interests.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Trying to escape weeks of chaos and violence, people in Haiti rush to airports in the north, where we have a special report.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
For China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. Thousands of people have been killed and hundreds of thousands more displaced across Haiti as the country battles a surge in gang violence. Armed gangs set fire to at least 100 vehicles and garages in Haiti's capital, Port-au-Prince, over the weekend. A wave of attacks this month has included raids on police stations and the international airport, which has led to commercial flights being suspended. Rising numbers of people are trying to flee Haiti as armed gangs expand their control over the capital and violence spreads. Our correspondent Dan Collins is at the airport in the port city of Cap-Haitien.
This is the airport in Cap-Haitien in northern Haiti, which has just reopened to commercial flights. And over here we can see some Haitians who are using those commercial flights, seeking to fly on either to the United States or in some cases to other Caribbean countries. The Florida Department of Emergency Management is also here and helping with a U.S. charter aircraft for U.S. citizens, particularly Floridians, helping them to leave the country and return to Florida or stay with relatives in the United States. This comes after weeks of chaos and violence that has engulfed Haiti, particularly the capital, Port-au-Prince, and many of the people we're seeing here have traveled from the capital, Port-au-Prince. As the UN has reported, 360,000 internally displaced Haitians in the country. So many are seeking to come north to Cap-Haitien, which is still relatively peaceful, and things are starting to return to normality. For example, the airport is reopening. We are also hearing from the Port-au-Prince, which of course is largely dominated by criminal gangs, that the World Health Organization is now able to work with the health ministry in Haiti to provide some sanitation, logistics and healthcare. And for those displaced people in the capital, the World Food Programme is now providing more than 17,000 hot meals for those people who have been forced out of their homes by the gang violence of recent weeks. This is Dan Collins for CGTN in Cap-Haitien, northern Haiti.
In the United States, President Joe Biden is appealing to the country's highest court as it considers restricting access to an abortion pill that the White House is fighting to keep broadly accessible. The Biden administration is trying to reverse a lower court ruling limiting how the drug is prescribed and distributed. The landmark case is putting reproductive rights back on the agenda in a presidential election year. Arguments are set to begin shortly. More than 100 Nigerian students and staff kidnapped on the 7th of March have arrived back in the city of Kaduna. Of the 138 people abducted, 6 are now in hospital and 1, a teacher, died in captivity. The army rescued 137 hostages on Sunday, a day before the deadline for a $690,000 ransom payment. According to authorities, no ransom was paid. At least 20,000 cars have been damaged in the city of Yiwu in China by giant hailstones. The rare storm also caused damage to farm buildings in the outer areas of the city. Meteorologists said the storm was caused by a strong cold wave from the north. Germany's national rail operator Deutsche Bahn has reached a deal with union workers. It's agreed to reduce working hours for train drivers without cutting pay. By 2029, train drivers will have a 35-hour working week. The deal includes a 2.7% hourly pay increase for those who want to stick to a 40-hour week. The deal comes after months of disputes and nationwide strikes. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi says more face-to-face meetings with US officials will boost understanding and trust between the two sides. He's been meeting the chairman of the National Committee on US-China Relations in Beijing, along with the group's president. Wang said recent problems had arisen because the United States had come to view China as a strategic rival. The committee chairman and president welcomed an initiative for 50,000 US students to visit China over the next 5 years. Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte is on a two-day visit to Beijing, amid tension over chip-making technology. The Netherlands recently imposed limits on exports of semiconductor manufacturing equipment to China, citing security concerns. Rutte will meet President Xi Jinping on Wednesday. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Ross Cullen, who is in The Hague. So, Ross, why is Mark Rutte going to Beijing?
Yeah, hi, Robin. The Dutch Parliament buildings you can see behind me here in The Hague in the Netherlands, and Mr. Rutte making his fifth and what's likely to be his final trip to China as the Dutch Prime Minister, because he will be handing over once the parties can agree on a coalition government after the elections at the end of the year. He will have his big day of diplomacy on Wednesday, meeting President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Qiang. This evening in China, he's been joining a dinner with the Dutch community in China. And the Dutch government says that economic priorities will be the main driver of this visit by the Dutch Prime Minister. He's going along with his trade minister. But there are these security concerns, these geopolitical issues, all related to the semiconductor industry. Dutch giant ASML is the world's leading supplier to the semiconductor industry, but it has not been able to receive licenses going forward so far this year to be able to service the equipment it's already got inside China. It has three major bases in Shenzhen, Shanghai and in Beijing. And so we are all seeing these wider geopolitical concerns because the EU here is trying to develop its own industry. China is trying to develop a homegrown chip-making industry as well, along with the US, which is trying to reduce its reliance on China.
Ross Cullen in The Hague, thank you very much. And finally, on the run, an ostrich has galloped along a highway outside Seoul after escaping from a zoo. The animal spent an hour trotting alongside cars and dodging traffic as surprised drivers filmed the runaway. Police and the fire department managed to direct the ostrich into a car park where it was safely captured. The animal is now back in the zoo and unharmed, with just a few ruffled feathers. And that is The World Today. Thanks for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.